You can access the entire episode now on our website, forbiddenknowledge.news, Rokfin, Rumble, and all podcast platforms. In some aspects, it seems like we're de-evolving as humans, but if you step back and look at everything as a whole, we are actually evolving in different ways, and we're just adjusting to the flow of information and everything that we experience, and we are forming this collective understanding of everything, right?
That's right. It is a collective knowledge, and that applies to a simple thing about bridge building. Let's say, just taking that out of nowhere. How can I build a bridge over the Ohio River by myself? No. It takes the collective energies of people and their knowledge, the things that humans have learned for hundreds of years, and more specifically that individuals are able to put to task. I couldn't do it or anything. I don't know how my car works. I know it turns on when I push the button.
Yeah.
But people have come before me that even 150 years ago, those people didn't exist because nobody knew how to turn on a car because they hadn't invented them yet. But people invent things. We evolve. Yeah. We evolve with the creation of that bridge, and we evolve with the creation of the car. What will we evolve into next? It leaves us behind. You're talking about devolving. We devolve when we forget how to do certain skills that are no longer necessary for us to know as individuals, but they are necessary for us to know collectively. So we might forget how to do that, like build a car. I don't know that I would have ever known how to do that, but we go on. Like I said earlier, we move space in our brain. We make way for new things. We don't need to keep space in our brains for that individually anymore. So I often used to wonder about, how do people become genius and how do they create new things? And I compare myself to that, and I think, well, I could have never done that. But you don't know until you're in that situation. We living on the backside of a lot of technology and inventions. And they'll just get deeper and more complex as the future comes upon us. But
yeah, that's fascinating. Now, I want to dive deeper into what's happening with the Mandela effect, and I want to reference one of the most profound ones for me, one that really got me shaking my head and scratching my head and wondering what's going on here. There's a Bible verse, Isaiah 11:6, I believe, that supposedly at one time said that the lion shall lay with the lamb, and now it's changed to the wolf shall lay with the lamb. And I was speaking with a biblical scholar the other day who was in a meeting with a bunch of other religious leaders and spiritual leaders, and they were going over some of these Bible verses, and when it came to that, he immediately perked his head up, and a few others in the room, and questioned that, being a biblical scholar. So this is very interesting. Maybe we could break down what's happening here.
Okay. Well, I do have I'll give a little sales pitch to one of my alma maters. I do have a Master of Divinity from the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, which is the second largest seminary in the United States. When I attended Southern, it was much more academic oriented than seems like it is today. Yeah, that's another whole podcast right there. The way people are interpreting things is what you're talking about. How is this interpreted differently? You must understand that the Bible, you're talking especially about an Old Testament verse in the Bible. A lot of people are not aware of the distinctions between Old Testament and New Testament. Something as simple as that would be to a student of the Bible like myself, or someone that would be called a much more thorough scholar. I certainly don't consider myself a scholar, but I think I spent 4 years in the seminary, so I understand the Bible. And prior to the seminary, I also studied Greek and Latin languages, and then took on Hebrew in the study of the Bible. And I know that the thing that really bothers the layman, I'm not saying this, and I don't want to put anything into words that makes people feel like I'm condescending, because that's not my intention. But unless you have made yourself or made the tools of scholarship available to yourself that is used in Bible interpretation, then you're going to have a lot of questions that to the biblical scholar may not seem that significant. I have to know how to read ancient Hebrew to be able to read that verse of scripture. And it's going to be interpreted differently across different historical eras. And also remember that guy we were talking about earlier, the monk. You know, there's going to be translations of the Old Testament that depends on who it was. They're going to have added their little bit of spice to it that changes how it's translated. Transliterated is the word I want to use. In Hebrew, of course, it's the Hebrew script. In the New Testament, it's written in Koine Greek, which is the ancient Koine Greek alphabet, which is, all of those are not English, of course. And you have to transliterate first. That is, turn it into an English letter before you can read it. For instance, the simplest word I can think of, say in Greek, is logos. We know what a logo is. It represents a symbol. Or in the case of just simple reading, it is the Greek word for word. If you saw that in Greek, you wouldn't recognize that. So the first thing you have to do is you've got to take that lambda and that omicron and that gamma and that omicron and that sigma, and you've got to turn them into an logos. So that's one thing you got to do. So biblical scholarship requires you almost to go through a two-step authentication process. I think translation of the Bible had its two-step authentication long before we came up with that for security reasons. Now, after you do that, then you have to understand the cultural milieu in which that verse was written. And this is another thing that scholars argue about all the time. When was Isaiah written? And there'll be disagreements about that. In fact, there's the mainstream of classical biblical scholars, those that focus more on the scholastic part rather than the spiritual part, they'll say that the book of Isaiah was written by three different people. And it's often referred to as first Isaiah, second Isaiah, third Isaiah, first book, second book, third book, because they're able to illustrate distinctively different styles of writing in those different parts of that one total book. Just like you probably, when I say you, I'm saying, I don't mean you specifically because I'm not familiar with what all you are familiar, but say the common person who likes to read a lot today, they are able to tell the difference from something that Hemingway wrote. People make jokes about the style of Hemingway all the time because he was so verbose and descriptive, but it's enjoyable reading. But his style of writing is a lot different than Susan Collins or some other popular author that you would think of today. So the point is, you're able to recognize the difference because you just do. You can tell the difference in how this writer writes. So scholars are able to look at the book as a whole, and they're able to find that point at which the writing style changes and it becomes something else. You know, Hemingway didn't write the way the Bronte sisters wrote in Jane Eyre or something like that. So the writing styles are different. Now, that's another point you have to take in consideration. The writing style. You have to take in consideration, as I mentioned before, the times in which it was written.